Chapter 4. The next evening, Jack was back on the roofs. The sun, already low, peeped between the chimney stacks. The violent orange sky bled into the darkening clouds, creating a cluster of purple bruises. Long shadows surrounded Jack as he hopped onto a ledge and surveyed the collection of rooftops. He'd been waiting all day for this moment, and he planned to savor every precious minute of it. Exactly 10 seconds later, he spotted something out of the corner of his eye. Or rather, someone. A huddled figure wearing black. Beth was sitting with her back to one of the tallest chimneys, her rucksack by her side. Seeing her made his nerves jingle. Was she stalking him? Then he noticed her head was buried in her arms and her shoulders were juddering up and down. Jack hesitated. He needed someone else's problems like a hole in the head, but he couldn't very well leave her there looking so upset. He slowly made his way towards the hunched shape. He put out a hand and touched her lightly on the shoulder. She practically jumped out of her skin. "Why did you sneak up on me?" she squawked, rubbing her eyes frantically. The smudged black and white makeup tinged her face a ghoulish gray. "Sorry," he said. "Are you okay?" "Do I look okay?" He shrugged and started to turn away. If Judy's going to be like that, he really couldn't be bothered with her. He had better things to do with his time, like shadow jumping. "If you must know, I've lost something," she said. "Satisfied?" His heart thumped uncomfortably against his chest wall. Dealing with a bawling goth girl wasn't what he had in mind when he had left the flat earlier. "Sorry," he said again. He shifted uncomfortably from one foot to another and waited for her to say more. But all she did was take another swipe at her tears and then stare at him. "You've cut yourself." He glanced down at the angry-looking sore on the back of his hand. It extended from the bony base of his forefinger to his wrist. A brown, crusty scab had formed over the top, but he must have knocked it on his way up. Now blood seeped out onto the pink, raw-looking skin skirting around the edges of the wound. It looked revolting. "Here, you've got to keep it clean." Beth produced a bottle out of her rucksack. He winced as she poured water over the gash. Then she rummaged in her bag again, bringing out what looked like a mini first aid kit. Tore open a small carton and carefully covered the wound with a plaster. "I've told you it's dangerous running around on the roofs." "I didn't do it on the roof." Beth handed him her water bottle, and he took a swig. "You're not going to leave me hanging, are you?" She leaned forward and peered at his face underneath his hood. "Is it something to do with this gunk you're covered with?" Jack nodded. Before he knew it, everything tumbled out in a rush. It was as if someone had shaken him up like a bottle of fizzy drink and then unscrewed the cap. Words exploded out of his mouth at a force he couldn't stop. Weeks, months of silent worry released in a torrent. All about being allergic to sunlight and wearing the horrible gooey gloop to stop his skin burning. "Oh, I've read about that," said Beth, "in a magazine. What is it called? Photo something." Photosensitivity. Jack normally didn't like talking about his condition. Whenever he did, people would listen for a few seconds and then slink away, as if afraid that what he had was catching. To his relief, Beth wasn't like that. There was no sudden excuses to leave, no furtive wiping of her hands as if she touched something repulsive. She listened, asked questions, and that was all. "I've had it since I was a baby," he said, examining the plaster. "The doctors have tried everything, but I'm allergic to all their treatments. My dad's a research scientist and made up a special sun lotion for me to use. Super strong stuff, but good for my skin. It buys me time, extra minutes I can be in the sun without burning." As he spoke, an intense prickliness spreading along his wounded hand and misery washed over him. "Now it's stopped working. My skin's condition's gone crazy, and Dad's left home. I've no idea where he is." "Why don't you go and find him?" said Beth, getting to her feet and heaving her rucksack onto her back. "Before it's too late." "I'll help you if you like," she called, glancing at him over her shoulder. "I haven't got anything else to do over the summer." Jack trailed behind her. No, it's okay." Unease pulled through him. He wasn't used to people being friendly towards him, especially when he'd just met them, and he wasn't sure Dad wanted to be found. "What's the problem?" Beth stopped and twisted round to stare at him. "Nothing," he said, wishing now he hadn't opened his big mouth and told her his problems. "Look, you're not the only one who's bored. I moved here a couple of weeks ago. You're the first person I've met. You need help to find your dad, and I'm offering it. But if you don't want it—" Beth looked at him, hands placed on her hips, like Mom stood when she was cross about something. What could he say? He didn't know her well enough to spend any time with her. That sounded really weak. How else could he get to know people unless he spent time with them? She scared him? That was plain pathetic. He moaned about not having any friends, and here was someone offering friendship. Why wasn't he jumping at the chance? Because he was an idiot. He opened his mouth to speak, but Beth got there before him. The least you can do is teach me how to shadow jump, she said. You owe me. Jack inhaled sharply. No way. She'd saved his life and listened to his problems, sure, but the roofs were his safe place. Shadow jumping was his thing. He didn't feel ready to share it with anyone. He scoured his mind for an excuse, a reason he could give that would get her to drop the subject. It takes tons of practice and strength. You think I'm not strong enough? He remembered her clutching his arm and hauling him away from the edge of the roof. A ripple of heat rose up his cheeks. If you can do it, so can I, she said. That's different. How? Asked Beth, her voice cool. He didn't reply. 5 minutes later, he was crouching with Beth at the bottom of one of the steep pitches. The ornate chimneys that domesticated the Victorian skyline towered above them. You won't be able to jump with that on your back, he said, jerking a thumb at her rucksack. It'll weigh you down. I'm used to it. It's coming with me. Beth's black eyes flashed. He shrugged. She'd have to find out for herself. He set off to perform a series of moves she could copy. He darted up a steep pitch, stopping in a shadow of a chimney stack. Then he slid downwards, using a parapet to break against at the bottom. Twisting round, he watched Bess slithering towards him, her mouth open in a wide O of surprise. He sprinted towards the next patch of shade. In front of him, the roof flattened out and a red brick wall reared up, casting a giant shadow. He dashed forwards, jumping and rotating at the same time. His right foot kicked off the wall, then propelled him over the low barrier to his left. Then, with both arms extended, he vaulted over a concrete block, his hands driving him forwards. He stopped, the other side, waiting for Beth to catch him up. That's such a rush, she panted as she leapt over to join him in the shadows. Her hair drooped in front of her eyes, and she impatiently pushed it aside. And you're brilliant at it. He looked away. He'd secretly hoped that she'd hate shadow jumping. Typical of his luck, she loved it. They clambered up the wall, separating the roof from its neighbor, and dropped down on the other side. A couple of striped deck chairs and an upside-down crate were set out on the flat roof to make a crude terrace. The sun had almost set now. Long shadows stretched from the building across the makeshift patio. Behind was a large sash window, the bottom pane thrown up. Several larger cans littered the area surrounding the seats, and faint laughter mixed with music drifted from the building. Come on. To Jack's dismay, she made for the nearest chair and plunked herself down, bringing out her water bottle from her rucksack. And she shook it at him. What are you waiting for? He edged over and pulled the deck chair further into the shade, flicking a look at the window. Relax, we'll move if they come out here, she said. She took a sip of water. Why don't you tell your mom about your skin? She could help you find your dad. Or get another doctor to take a look at it. Jack snorted. I'm fed up with doctors poking and prodding me and being a guinea pig for their new medicines. Besides, she'll know soon enough. If it gets too bad, I won't be able to hide it. Who are you? Jack flinched at a harsh voice. A head appeared at the window, and a boy with cropped brown hair glared down at him. His mouth twisted into a sneer. His forehead bulged, thick brows hung over his eyes, which were dark sunken dots in his face. Broad shoulders jutted out at right angles from his jaw, his neck made invisible by his muscular frame. He looked older than them, maybe 16 or 17. Whatever his age, he was huge. Jack scrambled to his feet, pulling Beth up beside him. He licked his lips, which had become sandpaper dry. A sick sensation bubbled up from the pit of his stomach. We're just leaving. The boy ducked through the window. He strutted towards them and then stopped as he stared first at Jack and then at Beth, his lip curling in disgust. What's with the face? He asked Beth rudely. What's with yours? She retorted. How'd you get up here? The boy glanced up as if they'd fallen from the sky. What's it to you? Said Beth. Jack putting a warning hand on her arm. Her body quivered under his touch. This ain't your roof, so clear off. The boy took a step towards her. Instinctively, Jack took a pace back, dragging Beth by the arm. He cast a sidelong look at her face. It was blank, but a tiny pulse pounded in her jaw, and her hands were clenched into tight balls. The music from inside stopped, and a female voice pierced the silence. Kai, where are you? I found more beer. Jack jerked Beth's arm. Let's go. Nobody pushes me around, she said. He's got a point, though. This is his roof. Beth snorted, but allowed him to lead her back the way they'd come. As they scrambled onto the top of the wall, Jack looked back. The boy called Kai was standing on the terrace, glaring up at them. Beth, time to run, he said, as Kai suddenly shifted in their direction. Jack didn't wait to see whether Kai would be able to scale the wall. He leapt off it. Landing with bended knees, he rolled, using his right shoulder to propel him to his feet. Beth landed awkwardly beside him. Go back to the warehouse roof, he panted. I'll head him off. He watched Beth disappear up the next ridge and waited. Seconds later, a face appeared at the top of the wall. Jack turned away and hurtled in the opposite direction to Beth. He swung under a metal bar, hurdled a low wall, and scampered up an incline. Sharp yells from the boy pursued him. He ducked behind a chimney stack. The blood in his veins buzzed from the thrill of the chase. Beads of sweat covered his face. He wiped them away with his sleeve. Popping his face around the stack, he saw Kai. He was standing below, looking around, his heavy brow creased in a frown. Jack smiled. No doubt, he thought, he disappeared into thin air. He waited. Then, hearing no more, he got to his feet and made his way back to the warehouse roof. I lost him, he said, sinking onto the towels. His stretched muscles throbbed. Sorry about overreacting. I hate bullies, said Beth, but the jumping was so much fun. Can we do it again? It's too late, and I've had enough, said Jack, weariness suddenly swathing him like a thick cloak. He'd got a kick out dealing with Kai, but he could still be lying in wait for them somewhere. And Beth's fieriness had sapped his energy. She seemed to go out of her way to pick a fight while he avoided it. As they made their way back across the roofs, uneasy thoughts twisted and collided inside his head. The roofs had been his bolt hole, a place to retreat when life got tough, when his skin was driving him crazy and he needed to escape the flat. But a line had been crossed when he and Beth had jumped that first shadow together. It meant sharing his refuge with her. And now she'd attracted the attention of Kai. Who knew how safe it was to be up there anymore? But Jack was fed up with being lonely. For years he'd wanted friendship, and Beth offered it, along with her fierce temper and impulsive nature. Look, do you want to come by my place tomorrow to hang out? He blurted before he had a chance to change his mind. Beth shrugged. Thought you didn't want anything to do with me. Sorry about that. I'm not used to people being so friendly. Beth shrugged again as if she couldn't care less, and then sighed. Life's too short. Jack was about to ask her what she meant when a small smile appeared on her face, her black lips curling up at the edges. Kathy said something about shopping for school uniforms, but I'll sneak out before she catches me. Who's Kathy? Asked Jack. Your mom? There was a pause. Beth started to look uncomfortable. Not quite. There's something you should know about me.